Welcome to XVONE. For critical review, with a brief reaction, is Jordan Maxwell Gnostic philosophy. And the reaction is, there is no religion higher than truth. Sounds good to me. Go wherever the wind blows. Here's Jordan.
Anyway, Paul, I wanted to talk with you tonight about Gnosticism, because so much today of the world is covered with religion. And in religion, there's a word that is used for people who involve themselves in churches and synagogues and mosques. The word for all people going to houses of worship are referred to, generally speaking, as believers. I remember going to Christian churches when I was a kid, and people would ask me, oh, you're a believer, are you? And how long have you been a believer? The word is believer, and it always struck me as strange why Christians and others are called believers, because when they go to their churches or synagogues, they're referred to as believers. And I don't like that word in relation to religion. I don't want to believe anything. I'd like to know the truth. If there is such a thing, I'd like to know the real story. I don't want to believe. And I get that idea from the government we live under. The U.S. is not interested in believing anything. The U.S. has FBI, CIA, NSA, and God knows about 50 more secret societies and secret organizations in the government for one purpose only, not to believe what's going on, but to damn well know what's going on. And so they don't care to believe you're all right. They're going to find out, tapping your lines and doing all the research on you. So they don't want to believe. They want to know. Well, the same thing with me. I don't want to believe anything. I want to know for sure. Well, the only way you're going to know is to take the time, and if you don't do it, you're not ever going to get to anywhere. Take the time to read and study and go back into the ancient world and read where all of these ideas and belief systems have come from, who started these different beliefs in different churches and religions. That's the kind of information that Paul has at the bookstore in San Diego. It is filled with brilliant and beautiful, incredibly important books on the origins of belief systems of this world. And my goodness, there's all kinds of stuff on UFOs and aliens and churches and cults in the Middle East and ancient history. Just an incredible array of wisdom and knowledge. So I just wanted everyone to know that this is a very important bookstore in San Diego, The Book Tree. So Paul, in relation to the subject Gnosticism, Gnostic simply means in Greek, if I'm not mistaken, simply means to know something, which is a little different than Christianity is to believe something. And I know that you, Paul, have been studying Gnosticism for many, many years. I haven't. I'm just aware of the general idea. Maybe you could tell the people some of the interesting background of the Gnostic belief, the Gnostic system of theology and philosophy. Gnosticism, what is it?
Well, there's two different levels in any religious belief system, and any religion will have these two levels, which is, first and foremost, those who are believers, as you mentioned before. And then there's a very deeper level, a very deep spiritual level, and it kind of reflects the very essence of yourself or your soul. And a lot of people are, they turn very fundamentalist because they've had these beliefs pounded into their mindset for years and years and years, and they really believe strongly in what they what they've been told. And so at the same time, you have at some point you have the ability to break through the simply believing certain things and experience something. For instance, a Gnostic believes that instead of being told what to believe, you can experience God for yourself because you have that connection to God within you. So, but if you approach a person who hasn't had these kind of breakthroughs yet, then they will simply tell you, don't bother me with facts, I've got my beliefs. The fact of the matter is that you have a deeper part of you that goes beyond simply, repeating things, that you've been told. So, one of the big secrets about Gnosticism is that what we've had is that Gnosticism, the birth of it, actually came about around the time of Jesus. There's certain facets of it that actually existed before the time of Jesus because there was always that ability within us to know these things on a deep spiritual level. But, I think the greatest value of Jesus' teachings was that he claimed to know God directly and that we could do the same. I mean, the greatest ally Jesus had was Gnosis. It was not the church. There was no church when Jesus was alive. But there was a Gnosis, or a knowing, which he had and he shared through parables and different forms of teaching. So basically, they tell you, Gnosticism, it's, they were heretics, stay away from them. Well, Jesus was the first Gnostic there ever was. So, it's, how do you, and that's the big secret that they don't want you to know. Jesus was the father of all this stuff. So,
and the Apostle Paul. He wrote close to one half of the New Testament are the writings of the Apostle Paul. And Paul was a Gnostic. He was not a Christian in the truest sense of the word. Mm-hmm. He never knew anything, especially didn't know the person Jesus, if there was a person named Jesus, but he didn't know any person named Jesus personally. And all of his terms that the Apostle Paul put into his writings in the New Testament, all of them come directly out of the Gnostic tradition. And so it was as if the Apostle Paul, or the one called Saul of Tarsus, was just telling you, and he even said that a couple of times in the scriptures. I remember one scripture where the Apostle Paul said, whether it is God or the angels or the Great Spirit speaking through me, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But here's what I believe. There is a perfect example of Gnosticism, where, the Apostle Paul is saying, I don't know if it's God speaking through me, or if it's a great spirit that's inspiring me. I don't know what it is, but here's what I'm telling you. Well, that's Gnosticism. And so, it's basically the difference between believing something or knowing it in your gut that you're right. Knowing something. You don't have to be, explained to and shown how to understand it. Your gut tells you, I know. I don't need to have somebody tell me something is true. So just knowing, in Greek is called Gnosticism, to know something. And the only way I get to know anything is by studying all the great authors and all the great people of the ancient world and what they wrote and what their beliefs were. And after a while, you get to where you got a fairly good idea about what's going on. You may not know all the details, but I think I have a fairly good understanding now of the Gnostic tradition as opposed to the Christian, Judeo, and Jewish and the Islamic beliefs, because these are all what we call belief systems. They don't know, they just believe.
Yeah, and so, Jesus had said well, we could be like him, and the church actually doesn't want you to be like him because they are the intermediary. And if everybody can be like Jesus, you got a bunch of people who are able to experience God directly. What do you need the church for? Their job is out the window. So, the great thing about this is that, we have sort of like a divine power or divine spark. The Gnostics believed that we are, in fact, beings of light, and that we have come from another place into this world. And there's a parable that they teach. It's called the Hymn of the Pearl, or also known as the Hymn of the Robe of Glory. And it's basically a reflection of us coming into the world, but it talks about how this young man is sent on a mission, and he's going to the land of Egypt, and he's going to come down, and his mission is to find a pearl that is guarded by a dragon and to bring it back home. But once he gets down into the land of Egypt, which is actually this earth, he forgets what he's there for. And we're all running around not knowing, in large part, why we're here, who we are. And so in this parable, he's down there, and, after a time, an eagle comes down and reminds him of what he's there for, and he wakes up. And, those who are enlightened as beings of light, they do wake up. And that's what happens when you wake up and you become enlightened. You realize, wait a minute, I'm not from here. And so, after that, you're aware of the work that you have to do. We're spiritual beings. We're here to do some spiritual things. We're here to learn who we are. We're here to help spread, kindness and other things like that. And so, he wakes up, and actually by doing this kind of spiritual work, instead of just accepting the Savior into your heart, you actually do some work in the way that Jesus would have done, or some other divine person. And then you're able to go back to your the place where you are, and when you arrive there, the robe of glory is now bequested upon you, and it is said that you have a twin in this other world, which has grown with your growth in this world, which is one of the reasons why you come down, because we're down here on this earth, which is a very low material vibration compared to the spirit world. And so we have the opposites here, light and dark, night and day. We've got good and evil. We can work with this stuff down here. And as we do, we are able to progress. And then there's another part of us in this other world that is watching us, and people say that we have guardian angels or we have a higher self. Well, yes, we do. That's because we're here working, in part for our higher growth. And once we go back there, and we able to go back into this other realm, then it all makes sense why we've come down here, what we're here for, and all that stuff. Now, this is something that the Gnostics teach. It's not something you'll find in the church. The Gnostics were actually the mystics of the early Christian church, and the church wanted to be the mouthpiece for that. And they didn't want you to be experiencing this growth for yourself, because they were the intermediary. They wanted control of you, and they needed you to fight their wars for them or do whatever, and collect your taxes, whatever they needed from you at the time. But from your own personal, deep, spiritual point of view and growth, we're here for a reason. And the Gnostics were able to beautifully talk about these things, and some of the older Gnostic texts have since been rediscovered. We're starting now, centuries later, to figure all this out. And so I think we've outgrown some of our religions, whereby, the God of the Bible is a very despotic and mean character, whereby the Gnostics believed in the divine feminine. And the divine feminine gave balance to the entire spiritual outlook of things. And without the divine feminine, you've got a mean and nasty God instead. I mean, we became a mean and nasty culture and a mean and nasty world. And the Gnostics can provide balance. And as we learn about how to treat others and include everyone, we're also growing in that spiritual way. So once we go back to this other realm, because we all end up back there, then we've accomplished something. So that's kind of what the whole Gnostic thing is in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I can see why the churches would not want you reading this kind of what we could call free thought literature. In other words, just read educational documentary, go to encyclopedias and reference works and read about the world you live in, and go to, and if you can, go to different countries and see how the people live, and understand a very important part of your religious life. It depends on where you were born. I mean, if you happen to have been born in Africa, you would have an African outlook on theology and religion of the culture you were born into. If you happen by chance to have been born in China, then you would have an Oriental or Chinese view of spiritual questions and concepts and ideas. Unless you were born in America, in Canada, and you would have, your viewpoint. So this is why people don't realize where you were born has a lot to do with who you are and what you believe. It doesn't mean you're right, because if you're the one that has the real truth, then that means the rest of the earth is wrong, and you are right. And then when you look at your life and the decisions you make, and if you're the only one on the earth who is right, then we're in trouble, because humans are continually making mistakes. So the bottom line is, nobody's right if everybody else is wrong. And so that's the last thing I remember in relation to this subject. I thought it was interesting, is to explain the difference between theology and mythology. Theology goes back to the Greek word theo, or T-H-E-O, or T-H-E-O, is theo, which is God in Greek. And so the study is ology. And so the study of God, or the subject of God, is called theology. While there is another school of thought called mythology. And I have always said that the difference between theology and mythology is really very simple. It's whatever it is that you, wherever you were born, and whatever particular religion or belief system you have, that you can call theology. That's the study of God. And since you are the world's foremost intellectual, brilliant mind, whatever it is that you personally believe to be true has to be the real truth. So therefore, anything you teach or anything you believe in our teaching is called theology, or the worship of God. While your neighbor who lives down the street that works with you, he has a different belief system, so therefore his belief system is what you call mythology. It's a story. The word myth simply means a story. Mm-hmm. And so he's got a story that he believes, and obviously it's just a story. It has no basis in fact whatsoever, no matter who he is, no matter what race, creed, or color, no matter what he believes. It's a mythology. It's all nonsense. Why? Because you've got the truth. You have the real truth. Mm-hmm. So you got the theology, and he has a mythology. That's how you tell the difference. You have the whole truth, and everybody else in the world can go to hell, because nobody knows anything except you. And so, this is why today we have the frustration and the anger and the bitterness and all of the lower, ideas of mankind, religion, philosophy, occultism, because it seems as though the whole entire earth is caught up in this same problem, that no matter where you are born, and accepting into your life that culture and that belief system, then you grow up and find out other people don't believe that way at all. And before you know it, there's an argument, and that argument leads to fighting, and that fighting leads to war. And so that's why the world is in the shape it's in today, because people believe things, but very few people are studious enough to know. Go back to an encyclopedia or reference work and do some homework and find out where things come from, what the words mean. Now you are a Gnostic, one who knows, as opposed to being someone who believes. So this is what I wanted people to understand. And there's a lot more we could talk about in relation to Gnosticism. You, Paul, have been looking at the subject for far more years than I have. What were some of the experiences you've had with other great Gnostics? And I know I've had some experiences with them, but some of the things you've learned from great Gnostic teachers.
Well, for a number of years back in the 90s, I would go to Stefan Heller's Ecclesia Gnostica Church in Los Angeles. And I believe that Dr. Heller was the first to open a Gnostic church in North America. And I would go and listen to him speak every Friday night, and for a number of years, and it's very inspiring. And the reason why I would go to him is because it gave me an understanding for the things that I've experienced myself. I went through sort of back in the early 1980s, kind of like a born-again phase, but then I experienced an amazing out-of-body type journey into another realm, and I was shown things, and I just had this, and it was a direct experience of some godly energy, and it was the most incredible, life-changing thing that had ever happened to me. So I went and approached some churches and some people who, I thought could give me some answers as to what is going on here, because this was, just the most life-changing thing that had ever happened to me. And I'd gotten either dead silence or, well, you're going to have to join our church first before I can explain anything to you about that, and so, and then others it just seemed like they were afraid to even talk about it, or they just didn't know. So I realized at that point that, I had a direct experience, and I didn't know that you called it Gnosticism at the time. I didn't know what it was called, but I just knew that this is powerful stuff. So it was only a few years later, a couple years later, that I moved to California, because this happened in Massachusetts. And I moved to California, and I discovered that there was a church that, it talked about direct experiences, and this, everything made sense to me now through the work and explanations of Dr. Heller, Dr. Stefan Heller, and it's Holleller. He's written some great books on the subject as far as the whole history of it and an understanding of it, and he's written a really good overview of Gnosticism in general, and so he's one of them. And then that inspired me I actually have since written a workbook called Life's Biggest Questions Workbook, where you can put in answers to all of these direct experiences that you've had and what life means to you, so it's all written down in one place. I first started writing this thing as a way for me to share all of these incredible experiences that I've had in my life, and then I suddenly realized, wait a minute, what's more important than the person themselves that's reading this? So I made it into a workbook, and my answers are still in the back of the book. But this is a workbook for people that want to really understand and put together, and maybe almost in like a journal form, but answer these questions about what life really means. And it's a way for you to figure stuff out, but also to bring stuff out. And so that's something that you can learn from yourself, is my point. You can go and you can listen to these other teachers and things, and you can be inspired. But when you have when there's a way for you to learn from your deeper self, there's nothing more powerful than that. And I had it happen to me from some other realm that I went to, and then also, learning how to share that and try to understand it and to help others do the same.
Well, I went to Dr. Heller's church also, and I was amazed at how much I didn't know when I first went there. Because if you've never been to Dr. Heller's church, what was it called again? Ecclesia Gnostica. And he's on the web, and you could go to the videos on the web and pull up his name, and listen to his lectures, and you will see what I'm talking about. Because when you go there, it's a very spiritual presence there. It's a very respectful, quiet, and honorable presence there of people pursuing spiritual wisdom. But what I loved about the church was that all he was doing, all the times I ever went, he would merely explain where things come from. And this has been the big thing with me all my life, saying the same thing. I'm always fascinated to see where things come from. Dr. Heller and other Gnostics will do that. That's what the Gnostic Church was all about. You go and listen to a lecture, and he would explain from one week to the next some particular belief system that's in the world, where it started, who started it, how it got started, why people believed it, what did it happen, what did it do for the people who accepted it, and how did it operate in the world of mankind. And so you come away with a brilliant lecture on a particular religion or a particular subject or philosophy. That was the basic idea of the Gnostic Church, is just go to hear a wonderful and brilliant man explaining where things come from. And he would explain Catholicism and the Bible and the biblical ideas and belief systems coming out of Christianity and Judaism and Islam, and where they came from and what they meant and why people believed it, and who first presented this particular idea. And my goodness, not a religious experience as much as it is an educational experience. I mean, coming and listening to someone who dissects the spiritualism of the world that you live in, where things have come from. So that's why I consider Gnosticism to be so important, because it's not a religion as such. It is an explanation of all of the different belief systems in the world and how they connect, what they believe, and showing where they on what foundation they were based on, who the people were that came up with these ideas, and that is the most important thing about Gnosticism, is the education one gets, not just the wonderful spirituality and feeling you have at the Gnostic Church, but an education that is priceless.